All right, we're going to call our workshop to order. Welcome, everybody. Declaration of a quorum, 5 members present, 2 absent. Brings us to item C, hearing of citizens. Do we have anything? Nope. Brings us to item D1, consideration and discussion regarding TASB policy update 120. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. White and board members. If you remember at the March workshop, Dr. Perry kind of went through TASB update in detail. Going to give you another preview very quickly. There's no action at workshop. However, it is a consent agenda item in our regular meeting this evening. So with a quick overview and any answers to questions you may have is Dr. Perry, Deputy Superintendent, Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale, Mr. Horak, members of the board. As indicated, this is an update from the Texas Association of School Boards number 120. It does involve 5 local policies for consideration, including one related to some clarification regarding board election and the places, in addition to CB local regarding public notice for use of grant funds, CKC, which would include in our future iterations of emergency operations plans, information regarding any response to a train derailment, some clarifications around the student and parent complaint process, as well as some clarification regarding student discipline, specifically with physical restraints that would not change any practice, but just a clarification of policy language. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you all might have. This is on consent agenda for your consideration tonight at the regular meeting.
Anybody have anything? Good, good. Pretty standard, no questions? All right, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bring us to item 2, receive an update on proposed changes to the state assessment accountability system for 2023. Mr. Martindale.
This one won't be as fast. No, with an update to the 23 accountability system, Ms. Hendrick and Dr. Perry, ladies.
All right. So there has been a lot of information coming out throughout this school year regarding state assessment and accountability. And I know we've provided some of that via transmittal. However, things have really been continuing to evolve. And so this seems like an appropriate time as they're starting to coalesce and really come together in terms of what we think those changes might ultimately be. And so we'll be providing an overview of that information this evening with the disclaimer that nothing that we are sharing with you regarding changes to the accountability system are final. This is what we know as of mid-April, and so we do expect that there could potentially be some additional changes. We are providing the information based on what the Texas Education Agency has shared, along with Lead Forward, which is a reputable company in the state of Texas that follows accountability and works very closely with TEA to then share that information with school districts. And so we'll start with the timeline of where we've been and where we're going with these changes. So we received just right before spring break an updated framework to that A through F accountability system that really helped us to better understand where things were headed. At that time, we were expected to receive some what-if reports, which would compare last year's data based on the changes to this system. At this point, that arrow has actually shifted over since we received the information to late May. And so at that point, TEA will release reports sharing with us if we had been under the changes to the system last year, what would our ratings assigned look like. We also can expect late in May a draft of that accountability manual that will be used to rate districts late summer, early fall. May 22nd is when we are expected to receive some early raw scores. Raw scores meaning what number of questions did the student answer correctly, not actual scores in terms of whether they passed and at what level. What we will see that is very different in terms of student scores this year is a preliminary determination. And so with those raw scores, the the agency will assign whether or not that student was likely to pass, likely to not pass, or what they are terming in the zone of uncertainty. So that will provide districts some guidance in terms of what to expect regarding a student's performance. However, as you all know, districts have significant obligations under House Bill 4545 to provide intervention for students who do not pass. And so certainly as a district, we will consider this information along with other performance data such as MAP to help us make recommendations regarding summer intervention. In terms of the timeline after we receive those reports around whether or not a student might or might not have passed, we will then later in August actually receive students' scores. So significantly later than what we've been accustomed to in the past, and certainly past the time where we could make solid recommendations regarding intervention for summer. We, in mid-August, perhaps late August, will actually get the final accountability manual, and then A through F ratings would not be assigned until probably late September, is what they're saying at this point. So with all of the changes that we're going to be discussing, you can see right at the onset that that will affect the timeline. Another aspect of that timeline is the transition to STAR 2.0. So STAR has been redesigned. The purpose of this redesign, we are assured, is not to make the assessment more rigorous, but rather to make it more aligned with classroom experiences for students. This is a fully online administration. There are very few exceptions allowed, and any sort of accessibility tools, accommodations are embedded into that online administration. The writing assessments that were given in 2 grade levels have now been expanded to be in grades 3 through 8, but combined with that reading assessment. And so writing will be assessed as part of the reading assessment. The questions are more open-ended than in the past, and we're also seeing more cross-curricular reading passages. So that's an overview of some of the changes that our students can expect. And we did share communication with our families, I think early last week, regarding the changes in expected timeline. So this is just for your reference. Better information about what that is doing in terms of how we assess students across our 19 campuses. In the past, the windows for assessment were much tighter. Now we have multiple weeks to administer these assessments. And so Ms. Hendrick has been working with our campus testing coordinators to really identify when campuses will be testing. Part of that is due to access to technology. Our campuses are needing to share devices in some cases in order to ensure that we can complete so many online administrations. And so testing will be spread across a longer window. However, it's very hit or miss in terms of when you might expect 4th grade reading to happen versus 5th grade math compared to in the past. So as a reminder, and this is something that is not changing this year, students who are taking these assessments will be assigned a passing level of either did not meet grade level, meaning did not pass, or approaches, meets, or masters, meaning that the student did pass, but at higher standard level depending on the number of questions that they answered correctly. And so always like to preface accountability conversations with that reminder because the level of passing varies depending on the domain and the calculation that we're looking at. Something else that has not changed is that this system is expected to continue to be a 3-domain system, with domain 1, domain 2 being A or B, and we'll go into more detail, and then the best of domain 2 or domain 1 to then comprise 70% of the overall score, with 30% being domain 3. So stay with me, we're going to go through each of those. All right. Domain 1 is STAR performance primarily, and for elementary and middle schools, it is fully STAR performance. The way that that is calculated has not changed. The agency will take the percent of students at all 3 passing levels and get an average of those passing levels to then convert the average to a scaled score. For star performance at the high school level, however, there are some changes. The agency has been directed by the federal government to include students who had previously taken end of course exams in middle school. So if a student took Algebra 1, English 2, or Biology in middle school, they are considered to be an accelerated tester, and their ACT or SAT score would actually be used in lieu of an EOC at the high school level, and it would convert to that approaches, meets, or master's level depending on the score that they earned, as you can see in the chart on the right. So for reference, our current senior class of 2023 has, I believe, 356 accelerated testers. And so of those graduating students, we would be looking at their level of performance on SAT or ACT to plug into that accountability system. So very different than in the past, although our high schools have known that this was coming for several years and have been tracking those students. So the other aspect of Domain 1 that we are seeing some really significant changes in is CCMR, or College, Career, and Military Readiness. Now, this is an area that is in arrears, so we're actually looking at the class of 22 in terms of what will be included in Accountability 23. They have not changed how we're calculating this. However, there are major changes to scaling expected. In the 5 years since the system has been implemented, a CCMR score of 60, meaning 60% of your graduating class earning a CCMR designation in one of the 10 ways that you can, would convert over to an A. For this coming year, they have proposed to increase that 60 to an 88, meaning 88% of your graduating class, keeping in mind those students graduated a year ago, to earn an A. And so what that looks like in terms of cut points across an A, B, C, or D is here. So you can see a 60 converts over in the new system to an 88, 48 to 78, 39 to 64, so on and so forth. So on the right, we see just an example of what that might look like in a school district. So you can see the raw score, or the percent of students who were CCMR, what it was. Two A's and a 79 would then convert over in this new system with the change of scale to a C and a D. So significant changes. For us, we absolutely would see a significant decline. In fact, both of our comprehensive high schools would see a decline of scores from A's to C's in this scaling conversion, with the same exact percent of students who have graduated as CCMR. So this is definitely an area I want to make sure that we very clearly understand, because that scaling cut point has a significant impact on CCMR, which counts for 40% of Domain 1 for high schools and districts. Graduation rate, similarly, is not changing in terms of how that's calculated. We're still looking at the best of a 4, 5, or 6-year graduation rate. So you can see there those 4, 5, and 6-year cohorts, depending on which one is the best, could be students that started 9th grade all the way back in 2016. They are also looking at an increase of cut points for graduation rates, although not quite as significant as we just shared with CCMR. So you can see here 96% would now need to be a 98% to earn an A. Much like last time in an example school district here, you can see those A's and B's dropping to B's and C's in some cases. Here in College Station ISD, we also would see similar drops from A's to B's, or from B's to C's, because of the change in scaling alone. So we're going to shift into Domain 2. Domain 2 does include 2 different methodologies, and then whatever method is higher would become a campus or district's Domain 2 score. So the first of those 2 is Domain A. And so looking at that new piece, let's see. I must have a header issue. It is going to be a new calculation. So we're looking at not only student growth year over year on STAR assessments, but also specifically the student growth of students who would be considered 45-45, meaning they did not previously meet the passing standard and were to receive those interventions. So then they're going to scale that over, much like every other domain. So what is important to know in this particular domain is that end of course exams that are retests, meaning the student has already taken it once, those are not included. However, there is a lot more included in other areas with EOCs because we're now going to be comparing Algebra 1 to 8th grade English, English 1 to 8th grade reading, and English 2 to English 1. Those are new comparisons that were not previously made available by the state. And so high schools will have a lot more opportunity to show growth than they have in the past. The chart on the right shows you the number of points each student who tests on an individual test can earn depending on how they performed in the prior year, so the left column, versus current year on the right. So you can see students who at least maintain or gain in a performance level would earn a point. Some students could earn a half point. So, for example, if they were on the high end of did not meet in the prior year and stayed there, you could still earn a half a point. And so all of those points are then averaged by the total possible number of points on a campus to then scale over to your Domain 2A score. What is in addition to prior years is we'll be looking at just those students who did not meet in the prior year and then how they performed. And if they improved in their performance level, they could also earn an additional point. So overall, I think the cake visual is a really good image of what this particular domain shows us, that we've still got annual growth as part of domain 2A, but the 45-45 is really the icing on top. So the students who show growth who previously did not would be a bonus. So that performance can't hurt you in this domain, it can only help. All right, domain 2B is relative performance. So you may remember this particular chart. We've looked at it most years when we talk about accountability. And what this would indicate is that we're looking at the percent of students at a campus who are economically disadvantaged relative to student performance on STAR, and for high schools also CCMR at that campus. And so you can see as the rate of economically disadvantaged students on a campus increases, the performance needed in order to earn a particular score adjusts. And so this is a regression formula to account for the impact of poverty. And so you can see in this particular example, a score of 54 could result in an A all the way to an F, depending on the rate of poverty at a campus, which is of course calculated based on the number of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So for high schools, they would do the same type of calculation relative to economic disadvantage and then average those two scale scores to obtain a Domain 2 relative performance scaled score. So the third and final domain perhaps has the most significant changes in methodology. This is the domain where previously we had those, I think it was 13 or 14 student groups, and we would have targets, and you would either hit the target or you wouldn't, and then based on the total number, how did you do? So the first change here is that we have a 1-year adjustment to how things are calculated for our English learners due to some redesign in TELPAS, or that English language acquisition assessment, that will or is expected to be just a change for this 1 year and then would go back. Another significant thing to know about Domain 3, especially for our elementary or smaller campuses, is that minimum size for a student group to be included in Domain 3 is going from 25 down to 10. And so you may have previously, as a campus, not had a student group count in this particular domain that you now would because of that change to minimum size. There are some interim targets being set, so that will over time change. We've not seen changes in the targets in Domain 3 since it has been a part of this accountability system. And also, instead of just a yes or no, it will be more of a graduated outcome. So you can get at least some partial credit, right, if you're moving towards that particular target. And then lastly, this will now be 4 overall student groups that are evaluated. So first would be at the all students level, meaning every student on your campus, how did they do relative to the targets? Then they would look at the prior year's 2 lowest race and ethnicity groups and how they performed combined. And then what they're calling a super group or a high focus group. They seem to be using those words interchangeably at this point, that would mitigate the impact of one student counting 5 or 6 times if they do fall into multiple student groups. And so there's some pretty significant changes here, but it really aligns actually pretty nicely with the work that we are doing in our strategic plan to elevate the performance of our historically underperforming student groups, because these are the students that we are really focused on in ensuring that they have great instruction and are making good academic progress. So let's talk just briefly about overall ratings. As I mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation, we've still got those 3 domains. Here we're looking specifically at elementary and middle school. And so you can see Domain 1 is completely star performance for those grade levels. For Domain 2A, we're looking at star specifically with academic growth year over year. Domain 3, again, is star performance. And then it also does include a little bit with the EL proficiency, the English learner, meaning TELPUS. But overall, really, it is straight up star, other than that 10% of Domain 3. We're going to add in, now you can see high schools and districts. Domain 1 also incorporates a large portion of the college career military readiness as well as graduation rate. Domain 3 also includes the CCMR, and then, Domain 2B, and then Domain 3 does have a little more diversity in what's included for high schools and districts with some CCMR listed as well. Another big change that we're expecting for this year is out of what TEA is terming the problem with A through F system. And that is that about a third of the districts in the state are showing a disconnect between campus performance and district performance. And so this is just an example, ISD, this is definitely not College Station ISD, but just to give you a flavor for why they're making this change. This particular district earned a B, despite the fact that all but one of their elementary and middle schools earned a C, D, or F. And so the state is saying, we need to make some adjustments so that we are better reflecting the district's overall score relative to campus performance. And so the way that they're going to do that is to weight each campus's performance based on the total enrollment at that campus to then derive the district score. Rather than an aggregate of all students' performance at the district level, it will be weighted based on each individual campus's performance. So you can see the methodology is listed out there in detail, but that is really the overall big picture, is that weighting. And then if the overall scaled score or any domain of a campus is less than 70, then the highest district can receive would be an 89. And we saw that here in College Station, and I think the first year of A through F ratings, that the district would have earned an A, but because there was, I think, one campus that was a little lower, we were not able to, and we were assigned an 89. So, big overview, there are a number of areas where there's not a whole lot of change, especially in calculation. What we're really seeing are significant changes in scaling, especially with CCMR, and that will certainly have an impact on districts, as well as that overall calculation happening through the weighted process. So I want to circle back just on the timeline where we began, and also pause because I know, looking at Sherry, that I probably forgot something important, and just take an opportunity to hear any questions that you might have, and discuss any particular questions or concerns that you have regarding these proposed changes.
The adjustment in the CCMR calculation, I assume, is going to have a negative impact on 99% of the high schools in the state. Is that correct assumption, Sherry?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now we're scaling enrollments relative to the district rating. And I suspect that the high schools in most districts are the largest campuses, correct? Okay. And then we're telling districts how we're going to judge them after the assessments of which the data is going to be used to calculate that judgment
Correct.
is done. Okay. Just clarifying from my thoughts. Thank you.
Can you go back up one slide? I thought that was a good summary.
Yes, absolutely.
Soaking it in.
Yes.
Was there a stated justification or logic behind why they changed the scaling so drastically?
So I've actually had an opportunity to hear the commissioner speak to this a little bit. And what has been shared with districts is that there has not been an increase since the beginning of the accountability system. Now, never mind that we had a significant event that impacted multiple years during the midst of the last 5 years. But what was shared with us is that districts have been showing gains in CCMR. And so it's time to really up the ante, so to speak, in terms of where students are expected to be with CCMR, albeit this is a significant change, and it is based on students who graduated a year ago. So there is no opportunity for districts to respond.
Yeah, it's kind of a whiplash. And this is the same commissioner that didn't think 0.3 was a statistically strong correlation. Is going to make scaling discussions. Okay, I just want to make sure that people doing the math should know how to do math.
He has been serving for quite a number of years at this point, yes.
I'll go back to a question I asked a couple months ago multiple times. Are private schools held accountable to this?
No,
Do they do
ma'am.
the same things? No?
No.
So as I understand it, domain 1 is changing a little bit. Domain 2A is changing a lot. Is that right? How I understood it?
Yes, so domain 2A is going to be where we've got that addition of the 45-45 component, as well as additional assessments for high school that were not previously included.
And domain 1 appears to be one that could negatively affect districts, but domain 2A looks like it could positively affect districts.
Possibly.
Man, they know what they're doing then. It just baffles me that, I mean, I understand the A through F because we are in education, but the calculations to get to that A through F are pretty interesting. So we can't change it. We just got to adapt and move through it. And
It's obvious why they're doing that. They're giving us a grading scale, so they can justify, oh, why are you putting good money after bad? So they can send money to schools that aren't being graded by this scale.
sure. I don't want to say that we continue doing what we're doing, but I think some adjustments, which y'all have identified, we'll have to clearly look at. So sorry y'all have to do that, but that's where we're at, I guess.
You know, we've always been a district that sees performance on these assessments as really a byproduct of good instruction, not the focus. And I don't anticipate that changing. What I do see us already doing is putting some systems in place to better monitor things, like where a student is progressing towards obtaining CCMR and what their plan for that is. Just more focused effort so that we can ensure that our outcomes reflect the greatness that we know is already happening here in our district.
Would that be something that the counselors at the campus level would be responsible for, or?
Counselors would likely have some involvement with that, but we're in conversations right now about how we can implement some systems that really automate a lot of this work so that it doesn't become an extra burden for any particular staff member so much as just a part of that planning conversation with students.
I was going to go back to the beginning when you started talking about the STAR and that it's going to, the results are going to look different. There's going to be a zone of uncertainty. That's a lovely term. And then talking about how, you mentioned how we're going to use that this summer to help the kids that need to meet the 45-45. So is that going to really change for us, or how are you going to tackle that with that uncertainty in there?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Of course, we're in the midst of a legislative session, and there are a number of bills out there that are progressing around 45-45. I think most legislators would say that the spirit of that law is not exactly where things have landed. I think the FAQ document at this point is 30 so pages long for 45-45. It has been a lot, especially for students who need not just 30 hours of supplemental instruction for one content area, but perhaps multiple. And while we prefer to do that in the summer so that we're able to focus on other things during the school year and not have students miss out on things that they might otherwise enjoy, that's not always possible. And so with the uncertainty of not having those scores this summer, it will make it even more difficult. So we're going to use our best judgment that we can based on the multiple measures that we have available, not only student performance on the raw scores with STAR, but MAP scores, along with just assessments that we are giving daily. I'm sorry, not daily, but in classes, and so we'll be making those recommendations at the campus level with parents' involvement.
So I'm hearing it sounds similar to at least last year, right, when we really had to kind of have some judgment and really try to reach out and get as many kids as we can that we feel need it into that summer programs. Right?
Yes.
And Amy's going to find money to keep paying for it for at least another year. Yeah.
And I have faith y'all do that. Everything I've seen, as far as everything from the map to the individual teachers identifying and making those plans, and I think the community will be very understanding of this is a single evaluation, and we look holistically at what y'all do. And I think I'd much rather have someone like you said that we're doing what's best for the student. No, we're not trying to meet this. We're not trying to jump through the special hoops and tick the boxes. As long as we're doing what's best for the student, if we take a little bit of a hit here, we've got time, and I trust that the staff and the administration can come back. But as long as we're focused on the student, not some arbitrary grade scale.
I think the fact that we have a strategic plan, right, with goals, and I think that's the foundation of the work. I think this is but one piece of the collective picture, right? I don't, so I think as long as we approach it, or the district approaches it from that standpoint and understands it's a piece of the big picture and doesn't define success, but is of course something we want to prepare our students to be successful on everything, then context will work itself through.
Anything else? We appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So now we're going to take a short quiz over the information that Dr. Perry just shared with you.
That'll bring us to item D3, consideration and discussion regarding long-range facility and bond planning committee work. Mr. Martindale.
Just a little update on the work of the long-range facility committee and their first few meetings is our CFO, Ms. Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale, members of the board. So tonight, we're going to look at the committee agendas, the things that the committee has been looking at for the first two meetings in the tour, as well as the future meetings a little bit. Review the purpose and responsibilities that you as a board of trustees approved. And then lastly, kind of give you a little preview of some things that our committee will be receiving in meeting number 5, just a little bit there. But first of all, the first meeting was held on April 4th. Dr. Lizzie Johnson, our liaison for this project, went over the timeline, the vision, the goals that you set as a board, the decision-making model to describe to them how we would come about consensus in the group. And then Mr. Hall gave a review of the 2021 bond to make sure people knew what was included in that bond and where we're at with that. And I gave them what we call School Finance 101. So we received questions and we responded to those as much as possible. Meeting 2 was on April 13th, and we had Zonda Demographics there to present a report to the committee. And then we went through the facilities needs assessment. VLK Architects went over a summary of those facility needs and the reports that you all have received. Meeting number 3 was April 15th. It was a Saturday. We had our facility tour. We were very pleased with the turnout. First of all, there's 48 committee members. Those are actually members of the committee that will have a say in that recommendation. And we've had very good turnout for all 3 of these, in my opinion. We were very precise in our expectations of attendance, and we do realize things happen and people do have to miss on occasions. But those that have had to miss have been very good about coming early to the next one and getting caught up. So we really appreciate their commitment to this project. Meeting number 4 will be April 25th. We're skipping this week. And we will be going over project priorities, the very different projects that we have put together. And they'll begin to see a worksheet of how they're going to review those and come about with a recommendation. Meeting number 5 will be on May 2nd. Our financial advisor will be here to present, and they will start putting together that recommendation and do like a mock vote so that they can understand what that whole process would look like. And then we'll round out with meeting 6 on May 8th, where they'll actually be coming up with that recommendation that they will bring to you at a later date. So we've got some full agendas coming up. So just as a reminder, what you as Board of Trustees approved in the charter for the purpose of the committee and their responsibilities. And just as a reminder, the responsibilities were based on the district's debt capacity and needs, combination of both of those. That they would make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees on whether to pursue a bond election, as well as the potential timing and scope of that program. And you can see under the purpose the various types of things that they would be included: facilities, renovations, deferred maintenance, buses, athletics, land acquisition, a very broad range of items. So this is where you kind of get a preview of some of the things the committee will see in meeting 5. So first thing I like to look at is property tax rates and how College Station compares to other districts, either in a close proximity or similar in size. I did not do this on purpose. I selected the districts, but of those districts, College Station has the lowest INS rate, that portion of the tax rate that supports the bonded indebtedness. And there's 3 that are lower than us in total tax rate. So I promise I didn't align it that way. It's just the way it happened once I selected those. So that's very interesting, I think, for the committee to see. And then you've seen this information before in our budget update, but you can see over the past 7 years, the district's total tax rate has declined right at 18.5 cents. Some of that is the required, what we call compression of the state funding formula, but you can also see that the debt rate did decline in 1920 as well. So our total tax rate has declined in the past 7 years. This is information I think you have also seen as well, and that is where our property value growth has been over the last several years. In 2022, you can see it was 11.1 0.4%, almost 0.5. In reality, that was higher because if you'll recall, we had an increase in the homestead exemption from 25,000 to 45,000. So that was pretty substantial. So net of that, it was even higher. So we don't know what 2023 will hold. You can look up in the last time we had kind of those kind of increases was in 2017 with 11, and then it went to 7. But prior to that, it was 10.9. So we also know that the comptroller's values, when they studied us, have said that we were a little low. So we can anticipate 2023 increasing. We just don't know how much yet. So we'll be watching that.
Wait, the state said that the local appraisal district appraised values too low.
Correct.
So if they don't adjust to what the comptroller is saying, then it could penalize the district and force them to accept those values, which in turns lowers the state's school funding formulas for the school district.
Yes, so let me explain just a little bit there. Oops, giving you too much information. So they came in and tested values, and they have looked at, we have to be in what they call a confidence level, a certain amount above or below. So they don't test every properties, but they do a sample, and then they apply some formulas to the area as a whole. If we're outside of that confidence level, then they basically say we have comptroller values, but we get what they call year 1 of grace. So that's what College Station ISD is in. We did have a time to appeal, but we were not able to find enough errors to make that difference up. So what happens is for the next 2 years, the Brazos County Appraisal District will be reviewed, and we must come within that confidence level in order to be assigned local values. Local values would be for both tax collection purposes as well as calculating our state revenue. If we come outside of that, then we'll get local values to collect, but they'll use that higher state value to calculate our state revenue. And if you'll recall, the higher values you have, the lower state revenue you have. So that's where the penalty comes into play.
Moral hazard.
Right.
I'd be interested to see when the headline tomorrow says state says our property values are too low. I'd be interested to see what the community response is.
So that's kind of where we're at. We're in what they call year 1 of grace, and we need to be within that confidence level for the next 2 years. I can tell you our appraisal district is working very hard in how to get some additional information in order to be able to ensure that that happens in the next couple of years for both of the next 2.
And so obviously the county, the city, and the school district are affected by those property values. However, we're the only entity that gets our rate compressed because of those property value increases, right?
I do believe the county also has some limitations on how much they can grow with that tax rate. So I don't really want to speak to those other entities, but I think there's some limitations there as well. It's just not the same as ours.
So even with that, almost 7.5% growth from 21 to 22, we were still under. That's what they're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Ryan was in the same boat. What happened with theirs?
I'm not positive. They also were out, but it was my understanding that the dollar amount that they had to find was not as large, and I'm not sure if they were successful on their appeal. They may not know yet. They may have submitted an appeal and do not know.
Amy, weren't there a great number of districts this year that the comptroller had this finding?
I think there was a
As far
record number of
as- yes.
districts that this occurred with.
It's just, so right, the higher the state insists the values are and the local revenue they think you should be collecting, even though they compress you after a certain percentage growth, then the less state funds you receive.
Right.
So
The
this-
higher,
And the lower score you get, which means you get less state funds. It's almost like there's a pattern of action here. It's a moral hazard that somebody can change the rules that benefits themselves, the one that's changing the rules. And then I will say, yes, that our compression is and everybody has my email. We're affected by compression to a greater degree than other political entities in the taxable district, which is why you only hear the school district talking about this issue. This issue that affects everybody because people move here for the schools, and when we underfund the schools, the community will all suffer on those property values in the decades to come.
So I've told you a lot about what we don't know. So what do we know for the coming year? So we know that for this potential bond for November 2023, if it's successful, the first year the INS rate would be affected by it is for 2024. So we have one more year. We know for 2023 that the district's total tax rate will decline due to that required compression, that our property values are going to grow, and so we will be required to compress it on the maintenance and operations side. So on a total tax rate, we know that that's going to decline. We just don't know how much. We know what rules we're abiding by right now, but legislative sessions got some pretty big bills in there regarding property tax reduction. Pretty confident for 2024 that the methodology will stay, so probably decline even again a little bit more in 2024. But 2023, absolutely. And we also know that College Station ISD is positioned well for new debt. And that's due to two things, thanks to you all as a Board of Trustees, that you've allowed us to pay down some of that higher interest rate debt as we've been able to with our current tax rate. And get some of that off of the books, reducing that for future, give us some capacity. And then also just normal amortization schedules, that older debt is being paid off. So those are some things that we know about the future. So when I say that College Station ISD is positioned very well, this graph shows you the total principal and interest by year as it's currently scheduled in the amortizations, not any additional early redemptions that we might do. But you can see in 2028, that total drops. So we're paying off through normal amortization. Some things are coming off of the debt. So that gives us capacity at our current tax rate and our current value, but we've already said values are probably going to grow. So we're positioned well starting in 2027 or 2028 for adding debt within that, assuming a level growth. And then it really starts dipping again in 2036, and then they're off. So in my opinion, we are positioned very well for some future building capacity and debt capacity. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you might have. Any additional questions?
I would like to call dibs on Ms. Nolan and say thank you for your work and
you're
for
very
your work,
welcome.
Mike, as CFO, because we're only able to have that because of the planning and the flexibility. So just like I said with Dr. Perry, I trust in your hands that you're going to do quite well with all these adjustments. No one else I'd rather have helping us get through this than Ms. Amelia Drods.
Just imagine how well Ms. Strauss would be doing if she wasn't cleaning up from the previous CFO.
I didn't say that.
Anything else?
I should say, so we've got some room.
We do.
We got some room. It's good news. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. If we have nothing else, we'll move to D4, receive a report related to the School Health Advisory Council. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Wright and board members. We have our Director of Athletics, Mr. Kevin Starnes, and Assistant Director of Athletics, Megan Simak, here to give us our annual report on the work of the SHAC throughout the course of this year.
No pressure, but the first two items, y'all better have a positive outlook on what y'all present. Just throwing that out
We're
there.
going to do our best.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale, members of the board. Myself and Ms. Simak are here to present about the SHAC committee and the work that's been done this year. So some things that we're going to talk about today is what is the SHAC committee? Give you a debrief of our current membership, the historical focus and things that have been done by the committee in the past, some things that have been accomplished this year, and then looking forward, some objectives that the committee has set out as well. So first, what is the SHAC? So every ISD is required to have a SHAC, which the majority of the members are supposed to be parents who are not employed by the school district. There should be at least 5 members, and all administrators are invited to submit names to serve on the SHAC committee. We send out an email in the fall to all of our building principals, encouraging them to promote the SHAC and hopefully share that with their parents and into attending. We met 4 times throughout the year this year, as required by law. So currently our membership is about 27 members. 10 district employees, 15 non-district, and then 2 school board trustees that have attended. And you approved this list of memberships back in October as it was submitted to you. As I said earlier, we met 4 times this year, which is the minimum. We are looking at increasing that for next year to 5, but this year we met on these 4 dates. Now, coming in new, when I came on board, I had been a member of SHAC, but I had not led a SHAC or been the district representative. And so just working through things, really getting a feel for College Station ISD and the SHAC focuses and things that they had done previously. And so really these meetings were geared towards kind of acclimating myself, as well as just get familiarizing with what our stakeholders really hold important to them and those priorities. So speaking of some of those priorities, the things that have been discussed or recommended in the past deal with nutrition, physical activity, recess, and you can read this list, but really it all falls around kind of that total whole child. Mental and physical well-being, the student-athlete health and safety. I think 2 years ago, the recommendation was to add middle school trainers and the implications of that. They've done the wellness plan. They did that last year. And so some of those things have already been proposed to you, but things that we have consistently hit on or mentioned over the course of this year, just making sure that we're up to date and those things are moving forward in a positive way. So that being said, Coach Simak is here to really give you an overview on the new curriculum.
Thank you, Coach Starnes. So I have the privilege of being the coordinator for health and PE instruction for the entire district. And so I ultimately wanted to start with giving you just an overview of what we've been working on for the past 18 months. In those past 18 months, we've been really busy with a lot of change in the curriculum instruction area for both health and PE. In November 2021, TEA approved new health and PE TEKS. And so with that, there were lots of changes that came in a very, very small amount of time. Immediately following, in January 22, our CSISD board adopted new local policy with regard to human sexuality instruction. Just a couple of months later, the board also adopted new instructional materials for our health and PE. And so once we had those 2 aspects in place, our teachers got really busy with beginning to write their curriculum because we started implementing that this school year in August 2022. So just to give you a little bit of a reminder of what that included, back in January 22, the new human sexuality local policy included the teaching of contraception and condom use in terms of human reality rates. After that, in May, we did formally adopt some new instructional materials, which included Quaver Ed, Catch, and Goodhart-Wilcox in both physical education and health. Following that, our teachers went to work in building brand new curriculum. And so what I've just linked in here is a little page of what our Schoology platform looks like for our health and PE teachers. So you'll see that's color-coded. The orange folders right here on the right are our elementary, intermediate, middle school, and high school curriculum. But we also just have organized into what our professional development opportunities are, our courses of innovation, meaning our partner PE courses, which serve students with special needs, and then our additional folders with a fitnessgram implementation that gets implemented from 3rd grade through high school. And finally, our biggest shift from the lens of our teachers and our students, we've basically broken down our professional development into the fall and the spring semester. And so ultimately, it's been our biggest desire to shift from basically trying to be sure that we're in compliance with our new TEKS and such, but more shifting our outlook on what we're doing in the classroom to advocating for our profession. And so what that looked like for us is in August and October, we really came back and we were sure that all of our teachers were trained on our new instructional resources. They also received their fitnessgram training. So everything really just to be sure that we were doing everything that was necessary to provide for our students. And then starting this spring, we really just tried to shift the lens of what PE and health look like in College Station ISD classrooms. That meant that we kind of took a look a little over the fence and looked at a few other school districts that are leaders in the state of Texas to see what their curriculum and instruction looks like. We basically, I don't want to say aligned, but we saw some of the good things and figured out what we want to do to implement within our own curriculum. And additionally, one of the things moving forward is we're also hoping to to continue to make relationships with our community, and that is something that we put on hold for April that we're shifting into for our next year as well. And just to give you some implementation results, I took 2 major factors and major changes that occurred this year in implementing both health and PE with the new TEKS. The first picture I included was our instructional materials implementation. Our elementary schools adopted Quaver Ed Health and PE. And so I just took a brief snapshot, a picture of what occurred in our October professional development. This was actually taken out at Lick Creek Park, and that's something that we were really excited about. You know, our teachers at that point had been 6 weeks into the school year, and we got outside of the confines of our school walls and really explored just a different location for our people to see and get ideas for what they could potentially do in the future. They were actually getting Quaver Ed training right there. So that is all of our elementary PE teachers who are really just super engaged there. On another note, as far as some of the human sexuality instruction that we implemented specifically for our 6th grade students, I do have some data for you for what that looked like in the fall semester. We had 380 students enrolled in middle school health. We had 336 of those students participate in all topics of human sexuality instruction. We only had 8 participate in some of those topics, and only 36 did not participate in that instruction at all. So that means we had 90% of our students in the fall semester opt in to human sexuality instruction.
Megan, will you go back 1 slide, please? You said opt-in. So again, a reminder to the board as a part of the policy approved associated with this, that parents had to opt in to each one of those particular topics, right? They didn't receive the instruction unless the parent specifically opted into it. Correct, Megan?
That is correct.
Okay.
On the folders in Schoology, so that's available as long as you have a Schoology account, parent-wise. You can access those folders if you have questions.
So this is the scope only from our teacher lens. This is the group specifically for teachers so that they can easily access their curriculum for their implementation.
Do parents have a resource through Schoology for this, I take it?
Directly with their teachers.
Teachers, gotcha.
I know as far as the implementation, for lack of a better way to say it, there's been a couple of hiccups, but overall, has it gone well or smoothly or?
I think probably the most anticipated part with potential just concerns is the human sexuality instruction. And that part over the course of the first semester went very, very smoothly. I think we were proactive in writing a letter and getting that out in a timely manner, both in English and Spanish. And that was shared out in plenty of time for parents to ask questions. I will say that over the fall, we did receive a handful of questions. We did have parents set appointments with both myself and with our directly with their teachers so that they could review the material, they could review the textbook. And ultimately, that's what House Bill 1525 was intended to do. So in a lot of ways, it's been really positive. I think it's provided some clarity and transparency for our parents, and I think they've appreciated that.
And one other kind of to go back a little bit further, even in May of 2022, we adopted that curriculum, correct? But that curriculum is available, like when we're reviewing curriculum, isn't that curriculum available for parents to review before we adopt it?
We did. We went through an instructional materials review process.
Right, and parents, any parent in the district can review that material before it's ever even adopted.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so continuing to now talking about things that the SHAC discussed or worked on this calendar year or this school year. The first thing is, as I looked back in the SHAC presentations to this board in the last few years, this first bullet was there every year, trying to increase the membership and representation across our district. So not just having small pockets of representation, but really trying to get a good cross-section of elementary, intermediate, and then secondary schools, as well as different demographics and things like that, so that the voices that are being heard in the room are really just a representation of our entire district. And so that's an ongoing goal of the committee, is to increase membership and representation. So, and we are planning on expanding recruitment for next year a little bit more aggressively. Another thing is when I came in, I asked, what are our bylaws? And there were none. And so that really got the conversation going. And so we have formed a subcommittee that has met 5 times in total and begun to draft a document of bylaws for our SHAC committee. And so really, it's been great conversation to be able to take from other districts that already have bylaws in place and then cultivate a document that we felt really was appropriate for our district. And so we have 6 members of the subcommittee that have attended, and so that are part of that process. And so we are working through that, and then we will have that completed in the fall. A third item is that we really discussed the mental health support for our students. We had a counseling presentation by Ms. Ahmed, and we also had a presentation by the Brazos Valley Coalition on Suicide Prevention. Just we know that coming out of COVID, our students, some of them really struggled social, emotionally, mentally, and so just being aware and then accessing resources for their support, so that they feel like they are not alone, and they can be supported and hopefully coached or counseled through those things. So
Is that an area where you can always do more, but that we feel like we're on the right track, or that the resources are there? Obviously, have to be taken advantage of, but I mean, where kind of are we when it comes to?
Well, I think right now the main supports that are in place for students are mainly adult to student, and research would tell you that's probably not the most effective way to do that. Really, it's peer to peer. And so I know that we had some SHAC committee members that went through a training that was more peer-to-peer based. I know where I was in my previous district, we rolled that out. It was called the Hope Squad, and it was students who were nominated for this, and they served as peer-to-peer supports. And so those students were there, and it wasn't a popularity contest, but they were there to help support those students who may be struggling, and just less intimidating than going to an adult that you don't have a relationship with.
Something that's kind of in the plans for CSISD then?
I think that's something that we can continue to explore and see if there's resources and motivation to, I mean, not motivation, but resources as well as a desire to do that. Yes, sir. So again, increased membership, complete the bylaws. That'll be done in the fall, that we can hopefully roll out and present. We will also, we explored maybe coordinating a CSISD Health and Wellness Fair for next year. We don't know if that, I have heard that that's been attempted in the past, so we don't know if there's really a desire to do that, but really exploring that and seeing if our community would like to, would be in support of that and access those resources. And then complete a SHAC self-assessment that was previously done in 2020, so it's time for us to do that as a committee. So I know that's brief, but what questions or comments other than what already been asked that we can answer?
Regarding the membership, obviously we've talked about a lot and wanting to grow it and like get some new faces in there maybe and some diverse viewpoints. If somebody's interested in SHAC, what is their path to say they're interested? Do we have something on, like the city has something online where you apply for their committees or something, or do we go to you, or?
I guess I am the district representative for that, but there is a website, a SHAC website that's on our district website, and then basically to be a member, you simply have to just show up. That's it. There is no other criteria. So I think one of the things that we've been brainstorming is maybe sending a representative to, promote it at PTO meetings, continue to reach out to our principals, and then asking them to just invite one person. Instead of just leaving it blanket open, really just encourage, like give it a number and see if that helps. We explored different days of the week to see if that would yield any increase in attendance, and it did not. So now we're considering, well, do we go at a different time of day? Because I know the DEIC committee goes at a different time of the day. So does that help us with that membership? So I think that's kind of some conversations that have been had.
Yeah, and I will add, I don't want to just the current membership and the folks who show up, because there are a great group of people who do show up, and a lot of them are from our district, right? Some really good folks there with some great input and working hard after hours for the health of our students, and some community members as well. But we know there's health issues out there. Health is in huge piece of our student success is having healthy students. So this is the mechanism to discuss those things and get, and bring recommendations to us. So I want us to have a healthy SHAC, obviously. And I'll just add also, thank you both for, I do think it was a good year to do what we did, right? To kind of step back and regroup with the change here. And I think some positives happened. Plus, like you went through, Coach Simek, your whole team was very busy with all the changes, right? How many years had it been since the TEAC changed?
20 plus.
20 plus years, right? So there was a lot of adjustments. I think a lot of positives. So thank you for doing that and sharing it with us. Thanks.
And Coach Simek has done a phenomenal job on this, and great leader, really taking this and running with it. And I know that the teachers, they've all, acclimated very well to the new system and things like that. So that's a testament to her and her planning and leadership.
Anything else? We appreciate, thank y'all for the upbeat report. Not to criticize the other two, but I needed to hear some good stuff. All right. Huh? It is still the state of Texas from the other two. You're right. So that will bring us to item E, adjournment. We'll see y'all back at 7.